Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I will try to get this up streaming on Facebook and share the link for anyone who wants to share it when it starts working. But I'm Raghu Appasani. I am the founder and CEO of the Minds Foundation, which is a mental health nonprofit focused on trying to bring back empathy and compassion to create a world where anyone, regardless of where they are on the mental health spectrum, can get access to the care and support that they need. And because of that, we were fortunate enough to meet some of the members of Your Mom Cares, which Meredith will speak about, and create a new partnership. And this is the first event we're doing together. So Meredith, if you want to just tell folks briefly about Your Mom Cares.
Sure. So hi, my name is Meredith. I'm coming to you tonight from Brooklyn, New York on behalf of Your Mom Cares. First off, thank you so much to Raghu and Ilang and the Minds Foundation for teaming up with us. We're really proud to be working with you to create this content and these resources. Your Mom Cares is a nonprofit organization which was co-founded by some incredible women, Sharon Feldstein, who is Beanie Feldstein and Jonah Hill's mother, Patsy Noah, who is Adam Levine's mom, and Taria Joseph, who is Alicia Keys' mother, some folks you might have heard of. But they have teamed up with other incredible celebrity and influencer moms to band together for kids' mental health. And the way that Your Mom Cares does this work is by creating and funding the most innovative and cutting edge programs, treatments, and solutions, which have a direct impact on the mental health of children and adolescents. We have strategic partnerships, as well as what we call our Mobile Moms Emergency Fund, which is how we make reactive grants. It allows us to quickly go where the need is greatest, as moms always do, to support a variety of pediatric emergencies. And with that, I'll turn it back to Minds, but thank you all for joining us. And again, thank you, Minds, for teaming up with Your Mom Cares.
No, thank you. And I'm really excited for a lot more collaborations to come together. And so I just want to start briefly with a quick meditation, as we do with many of our events. And if folks can just find a comfortable position wherever they are in their chair, we'll just go through a brief guided meditation. And just close your eyes and take a deep breath in and hold it. And breathe out. And you can just stay with your breath. So a lot of current events have really sent a lot of stimuli towards us and activating our sympathetic systems, prompting us to react with a variety of emotions, from anger to fear to confusion. And it can be difficult to figure out how to navigate such a world. So I challenge you to try to bring your attention inward and pause and discover what that internal state brings up. Whether it's a feeling of anxiety, anger, restlessness, happiness, or grief, just allow it to be without forcing it to change. And now try to turn your attention towards a child that brought you a discomfort by asking you a question. And notice what types of emotions come up for you. What types of feelings flow through your body? Do you notice a fear, an anxiety, or a desire to not have the conversation? Bring a sense of kindness to that part of yourself that feels like it's struggling. We often tend to run away from discomfort, which can enhance our suffering. So take a moment and pause, and let's take 3 breaths in together. So breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and out. And one more. In and out. And I just want to finish by reading a excerpt from one of my favorite philosophers, Krishnamurti. For centuries, we have been spoon-fed by our teachers, by our authorities, by our books, our saints. We say, tell me all about it. What lies beyond the hills and the mountains and the earth? And we are satisfied with their descriptions, which means that we live on words and our life is shallow and empty. We are second-hand people. We have lived on what we have been told, either guided by our inclinations, our tendencies, or compelled to accept by circumstances and environment. We are the result of all kinds of influences, and there is nothing new in us, nothing that we have discovered for ourselves, nothing original, pristine, clear. So take one more breath in and out, and open your eyes whenever you feel comfortable. So I particularly found this excerpt to be of value because I was a child growing up that questioned a lot of authority, especially my teachers. And I think that with all the current events going on, it's important to respond to our children and our youth who are questioning a lot of things that are happening, and to really think about the ways that we have taught education clearly have not worked for many reasons. And when they come to us with questions, it can be very uncomfortable and bring up a lot of these feelings of discomfort and anxiety and anger and not wanting to have the conversation. And so there's a reason we chose this topic between Your Mom Cares and Minds to address, of having difficult conversations. And I'm truly excited for this, and please engage throughout. There is a Q&A. You can drop your questions in there and we will answer them. And if we don't get to them during the session, we'll definitely answer them afterwards and provide some more resources online. So I'm really, truly blessed to have you all here. Robin, Amanda, Meredith, Ilang, Sharon, and especially Patsy, who I got to meet a few months ago on a panel, for bringing this partnership together. And so with that, I would love to hand it over to Dr. Ilang Guiroy, who's been a dear friend and teacher, I will say, for me during my journey of psychiatry training. So Dr. Guiroy, take it away.
Hi, my name is Ilang Guiroy. I am a psychiatrist. I'm in my last year of training at LAC USC. I'm chief resident in education, and I'm also the director of programs for Minds. I think that education is a really important part of what we do as physicians, and I think the most important thing is to bring this conversation to the people where it's happening, into our homes everywhere. And what I really hope today is I think moms and dads are really important, especially in having these conversations. And it can be really difficult to talk about things that we barely understand, right? And to have these 2 shining examples of what worked for them. So part of what we're hoping to do today is to provide a conversation of what worked for 2 people, and maybe this will inspire you on how you talk to your family. It kind of reminded me when I was pregnant and I was trying to figure out which stroller to get. There are so many stroller kinds, and I read read tons of reviews and journal articles, like blog articles, and I went up to random people at the farmer's market being like, oh, do you like this stroller? What do you like about this? And I realized that in that process of talking to a lot of people, people and hearing what worked for them, it helped me decide what worked for me and what works in my family. So hopefully the conversation today will help you kind of think about how to have conversations with your kids about, and the children in your life, about current events. So so I have a toddler, and that's one of the reasons why I've been really passionate about bringing this conversation. I think it's really important that moms have these kinds of conversation, and dads. Also, one last thing as a disclaimer, as Raghu and I both work with USC in LA County, serving some of the most vulnerable people in LA County, we do have to say that these opinions voiced today do not represent those institutions, they're just ours. And also, this does not count as medical advice, and you should talk to your own physician about your situation to best serve that. And we're not establishing a physician-patient relationship today. So I'm gonna have Robin and Amanda introduce themselves to get the conversation started.
Hello, I'd like to thank the Minds Foundation, and yes, I'm a core member of the Your Mom's Care, and I love the organization because I truly love children. I have 2 children of my own, me and my husband. We, CJ is Charles Paul Jr., he's 37, Chris is 35, and we're blessed with 4 grandchildren. Little Chris is 11, Cameron is 7, and Carter and Chloe are 6. And they are, all of them are the apple of our eyes. We have 2 daughter-in-laws, Desiree and Jada, and I'm a family person, but I love children. But I also know that mental health is real. So, I mean, I love conversating with children. So I'm really excited about this, and thanks again for having us.
And I'm Amanda Freeman. I have 2 children. I have a 4-year-old girl named Flynn and a 2-year-old boy named Archer. I normally live in New York City. I'm not there right now, but I live in New York City, and I run 2 businesses. One is called SLT. We had, at least prior to COVID, we had 26 locations, and they are boutique fitness studios, which is like a high intensity Pilates workout. And 2 years ago, I started another business called Stretched, where we stretch you out. Instead of coming to get a massage, you come and get stretched out. And we have 2 open locations, and we were supposed to be building out a 3rd, but we'll see where that goes. So, 2 children, 2 businesses, and I'm honored to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And these are definitely, the current events are so top of mind with children as well as in my business world. So, I'll probably make a lot of analogies because I've learned a lot from my interactions with colleagues and employees that I then apply to my children. And so, I'm talking about them all the time right now.
All right, thank you for introducing yourselves. So let's get started. The first question is, how do you talk to your kids about current events?
I'll go first, Amanda. Current events is nothing new to us. We talk all the time anyway. Growing up, we always conversated about everything. And some of the things that we're going through now, my children didn't experience, but my grandchildren are experiencing. And it all goes back to just having a conversation. Let's sit down and let's talk about it. Answer any questions. If there's an answer that I don't have, let's try to find it together. But the key is to communicate to your children. Talk to your children. Don't let the friends influence them. Let their parents influence them. I mean, that's always been very, very, very important in our household. Very important in our household. That goes for current events as well as anything.
So kind of what you're saying is that the conversation is happening.
Yes.
And it's really important to create space for that conversation in our homes, even if it's like a physical space of like sitting down and having these discussions, because otherwise kids will try to find their answers.
Oh,
and
they will find the answers. They will find a answer. Yeah.
What about you, Amanda?
Yeah, I mean, I had a very interesting experience, as I think most people did with young children, because all of a sudden, one day, everyone's lives changed. And I have 2-year-olds and 4-year-olds, so there really is no other conversation that they're hearing at this point, because you're now in your house, than anything I tell them, right? So they weren't going to understand why things went from going to school, going to all your activities, being able to interact, living in New York City, to one day we just drove out to our beach house for we didn't know for how long. No more school. Now they're taking classes on Zoom, and we're like, please sit in front of the TV for 45 minutes, whereas that used to be like something we didn't want them to do. And now you're giving them iPads, you're giving them things so that you can go do other things during the day, and they're interacting with nobody. And then when you're allowing them to interact with someone, you're explaining to them, like, you can't hug, about them trying to get them to wear a mask. And so it was like just thrown on you, and you really just had to find a way to make it as unscary as possible, but to give them the information. And I know when we first talked, my children wanted to go back to the apartment in New York City, and we had to kind of tell them, well, there's a virus in New York City, and that is why we cannot go back. And so that stuck with them so much. And they're like, when we'd see the train come from New York to out where we are, they'd be like, oh, the virus is on that train, that's why we can't get on it. But when it goes the other direction, there's no virus on that train. So you realized you had to tell them something, but you had to be careful about what you told them, because that just becomes like gospel to them. And so it's just very important to choose your words right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Yeah, you really highlight a lot of things that's specifically challenging with the littler kids, where they're developing their understanding of the world. And the world right now is so different than it would be usually. And like you said, like, they don't remember another time. And so is this how they're going to are we shaping their personal interaction for forever? Right? Like, don't run up to me when I come home. Like, I have to change my clothes and wash, right? Like, all of these kinds of things, it can be really scary, because little kids are so rigid in a lot of ways. Like, they got to pick something, and that's what they believe. So I think that, yeah, it is really hard to navigate.
It's extremely hard, and it can be hard for adults as well too, because we're in North Carolina. My children and grandchildren are in California. So we would see each other twice a month. But because of the virus, we went 3 months. That's the longest I had ever been without seeing my children or my grandchildren. So, they were asking, where's Nana and Papa? My grandson had a birthday, and all he wanted for his birthday was to see Nana and Papa. So, here we are praying, and, we're talking to them about what's going on. And like you said, they know about the coronavirus. They know, people got sick on airplanes and this, that, and the other. But as things started getting better, when we started talking about flying out there, their first thing, one of my grandsons, is Nana and Papa going to get the coronavirus if they get on the plane? Because this is what they see, this is what they hear. So, you still have to go back and say, well, it's getting better, we hope. They have to wear the mask. They have to be covered up. We have to talk to them and explain these things. 6, 7, and 11. But you have to explain these things to them. And when we got there, we had to wave at them through the window. We had to go take a shower and get out of our clothes before we could actually, be in the same room with them. And then they started asking the questions. And you know what we did? We sat down and we talked about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think kind of what you're talking about is that there's so many subtleties to all of this. And it can be really hard to explain that to kids. And kids, once you give them an answer, they're like, okay, this is the answer. But then the answer keeps changing.
Right.
And I think that reinforces this idea that maybe to remember that our kids are a lot more flexible than we sometimes can remember. And also that this isn't a one-time conversation. The truth is about difficult conversation you have with your kids, be it about like, why are we here? What is coronavirus? What's death? What is sex? These are all conversations that we have over and over and over again over a long period of time.
And I think it's going to continue to be very confusing, because at first it was like, we stay home, we can't see anybody. then I feel like everyone started loosening up, and it's like, my daughter was like, you can only hug your family and friends, nobody else. I'm like, who else would you hug? But okay. And then out here, they're actually allowing camps to open, and some people are choosing to do like smaller camps, and so it's going to be like, okay, now you can do whatever you want with those 5 kids, right? The 5 kids that you're seeing, feel free. Then if we go back to the city in the fall and school starts, it's like going to be nuts. It's going to be so restrictive, and you have to eat in your classroom. And then if we go through a second wave again, it's going to be isolation. So it's also, to your point, it's hard to say anything. It's hard to really have a strong point of view, because it changes, and it's, kids are adaptable, but you do have to have some level of consistency. It's like the parents that aren't consistent are the ones that have, unruly kids, because kids like structure. So you kind of have to, give them some sort of structure, and it's hard to do when the rules are changing.
That's a really great point. It's hard to give structure when the rules are changing, especially because one of the first things that we learn is like children thrive on routines, but the routine is constantly changing. So how do you provide a structure? It really is a challenge, and consistency, because they are still especially the younger ones are still trying to understand the rules. And if the rules keep changing, then it's like, there are no rules. But I think at the same time, toddlers live already in a magical world. Where they're like, especially the younger ones are like, oh, I guess that, sure, maybe that's how things work. And then you show them something completely different, and they're like, okay, I guess that's how it works. So I think sometimes we underestimate their ability to be flexible and their ability to kind of change with things, even though it can create a lot of other issues if routines are constantly changing. But yeah.
But I think sometimes children are more acceptable to change than we are as adults are. If we tell them it's got to be like this today, but that might change tomorrow, they're okay. It's just about the conversation. You just have to let them know that.
I think the hard part is going to be when you have to pull back all the TV, though. I don't know how adaptable they'll be to that. Now it's like one show in the morning, one show in the afternoon, and I already warned my daughter, I'm like, when camp starts, there's no show in the morning. We're going to have to get out of here. We'll see how adaptable she is to that.
Well, my grandchildren are already on a schedule. Their parents have them on a schedule with the iPads, with the electronics anyway, so.
Yeah,
I mean, even the rules for school change. I feel like schools used to, for kids, my kids' age, would say like, school is about the social, it's not about learning. Like, you don't need to teach in preschool kids like the ABCs, even though type A parents like me are like, please do, like, teach them how to read. And they're like, no, it's about social emotional. And then now they're like, do Zoom classes. And I'm like, what's social emotional about Zoom classes? Like, when did that point of view change,
I think
that was part of the change.
Yeah.
I think, Robin, kind of what you said, and I think what people, like parents of young children, also realize is just giving like lead time. And even when you talk about it with older kids, right, like school-age kids, teenagers, this idea that like this is a special circumstance. And even though this isn't a circumstance we usually think is like a day, like it's your birthday, right? There's special rules on your birthday or holidays, right? That these special rules apply for now, and they can change, and it is unfair. It's unfair that you got to watch TV and do all of these things and like didn't have to wear your clothes, and now it's different. This is a different situation, and we have to act differently. But I love the idea of actually giving them like one, context of like, this is a special time, and two, acknowledging the frustration, especially if they come out and say to you like, hey, it's unfair, like this really sucks that I can't see grandma, or this really sucks that I can't see my friend, or it's really confusing that I have to can hug this person but can't. And I think one of the most powerful things that we can do as a parent or as a caregiver is to acknowledge their emotional state.
Yes.
We're talking about, it is confusing, it is frustrating, it is scary that grandma might take a flight and she might get sick.
It's all about talking to them and explaining it to them. Yes, it is. And for those friends that they want to see, maybe try to FaceTime them so they can see, or some of them use something called Team or something just, you know, as a parent, try to make arrangements for them to see that friend or whatever.
So, how did you decide? So when talking about difficult things like racism, like a pandemic, like economic downturns, right? Or even other things like September 11 and terrorism, right? These current events, they're constantly changing. How did you decide what parts to share and what parts not to? And where did you draw the line?
I
Like
think we talked about, you know, my children are grown now, but, you know, like with September the 11th, we all as a family talked about that and, you know, looked at it and, you know, was wondering how things would change. And me and my husband, we talked about this not too long ago, when people could go right up to the gate at the airport, you know, and when that changed, we was wondering, how in the world is this going to ever work at the airport? You know, you can't go up to the gate, and now we all adjusted.
That's true.
We all adjusted. So, you know, that changed and it worked, you know, but just talking about your children through things like that, because it's just all about a conversation. Even with the race thing, you know, we have to sit down. We didn't teach our children about color. I mean, we love everybody. So we didn't teach them about color. So whenever any issues come up, and even now with our grandchildren, we sit down, if they have a question, we sit down and we talk about it.
Do you have an example of a time you've had that conversation with your kids, your grandkids?
Not anything direct. Well, it was something direct with one of my grandkids. They was on a Zoom call, and one of the kids made the statement that he'll be glad. I think the statement was something like, he'll be glad when all the Black people stop fighting. Wow. You know, because that's what he's either heard at home or he's seen on TV or whatever. So, you know, my grandson asked about it, and we said, his parents sat down and talked to him, and he talked about, you know, there are good people in the world and there are bad people in the world. That has nothing to do with color. Mm-hmm. So, you know, all cops are not bad cops. All people are not good people. There are some good people in the world and there are some bad people in the world. And it's important for us to get that point across to our children. You know, it has nothing to do with the color of our skin. We're all human.
Yeah. Yeah, I think race is a really difficult thing to talk about. And I think you gave a great example of what I feel like as a parent, if I heard my kids say that, I'd be like, what did I do to make them say that? Right. But I think that it's really an important thing that everyone kind of recognize that this is a teaching moment. And yes, that emotion, even though I suddenly feel a tremendous amount of guilt, it's actually about, let me do something about that. Let me open a conversation. Let me demonstrate this is a safe space for us to talk about these yes, kinds of things. And, you know, I think I really like that what you talked about is this idea that different people are different.
Yes. And it has nothing to do with the color of their skin.
And that can be really hard to talk about, right? It can be really hard to talk about, like, what does it mean that different people are different? Is it bad that someone else is different? And how do you connect those things? How can you tell someone's a bad person? Which is really kind of what this conversation is about. And I think like the kids have to discover their own, like through their own journey of like what that means, but that skin color or religion or like socioeconomic status, that those are not it. And it's a really tough conversation to have that you end up having over and over and over again.
And I think the language is obviously very different depending on your child's age. You know, what I did with my daughter there was no need for me to bring it up with her other than I wanted to bring it up with her because of what's going on, right? Like talking about coronavirus had to be brought up. So you know, like you have to explain why circumstances are different and why she can't see her cousin who's like down the street. With this, given my children's age, it didn't have to be brought up, but how could you ignore it? You know, like it's such a movement and it's an opportunity. And so, you know, the language I used is you try to think of how she thinks of people are different. So we're very into like asking people what their favorite color is. Like, you know, when she meets someone, she'll be like, what's your favorite color? And if they say pink, she's like, I like pink too. Or if they say blue, they're like, that's my mommy's favorite color. So she like likes to connect those things. And so I said, you know, like people, you like pink and I like blue. You know, people have different shades of skin, and like, it doesn't mean pink is better than blue, or my shade of skin is better than your shade of skin. She's like light fairer than I am, you know, so we could even make that analogy, like we don't have the same tone. But, you know, I think I'm gonna have to say a lot of times to get her to even like clue into it. But I think that's the key, is just to like establish that like differences are to be celebrated. And, you know, we talked about this when we talked last time. We're very drawn to people that are similar, and I'm very guilty of this. Like I like the people who have similar backgrounds, or you know, went to my college, or, you know, whatever, have a common experience. And I guess it's natural. Whereas I do think there are other people who seek out differences and find that more interesting than I do. And, you know, it's probably a flaw. And so, you know, I want my children to celebrate differences. And so you have to do it, you know. And I was also telling you guys, this is obviously a huge issue in the workplace right now. And it's not enough to be just not racist, right? You have to be like anti-racist, and you have to, it's not just like not discriminating against a candidate, it's you have to seek out diversity, right? So we're talking about how do we attract a more diverse instructor pool to our workout, to our corporate team, and to our clients, to be honest. Like, how do we get a more diverse clientele? And one of the big pieces of advice I got from you know, Black staff members is, well, we need to put more Black people in our advertising. Like, you need to see yourself reflected and to be like, oh, that is for me, right? That looks like that workout could be for me. And so I'm taking the same tact with my children, and I ordered books that, you know, are either about the topic or have Black lead characters, or, you know, even the Black version of Barbie, you know, like it's not necessarily something that's in my house. And I think you just need to expose them to it if they're not as exposed to the diversity in their day-to-day life. And so that's something, you know, I've been remiss in doing, and that, you know, I'm going to make a big effort to do.
And we, that sounds good, Amanda, but also we as Black people don't want any special treatment. We just want everybody to be treated fair.
Right.
And you know, that's the main thing. No special treatment, you know, because all this going on. Don't go that extra mile for a Black person or nothing like that. Everybody just needs to be treated fair.
Yeah.
Be treated the same. Treated the same.
Fairness is something that even little kids can understand.
Yes.
And being kind, right? Talking about these greater themes, right? Like kindness and fairness. And I think like talking about some of the more difficult topics is more appropriate for like a teenager, right? Maybe 12 and above. But some of these things, like it's about kind of talking about it in their vocabulary. What you were talking about when you were talking about like, what's your favorite color, and being drawn to people that you really like that have the same favorite color, is translating it into Flynn's language, right, into her world, so that she can kind of go with it and she can kind of understand it. And I think that this idea of creating resilient children is also something that we think about a lot and is like a very big topic. And part of that is recognizing that even if someone superficially looks different than you, or even if someone is profoundly different from you, doesn't mean that you can't relate to them.
Exactly.
And I think that's the powerful thing about having lots of different characters in your like book library. And it makes me appreciate my parents so much, like in the 80s, where my dad growing up, he really sought out books, like picture books that had all kinds of people as central characters. We as parents try to find things that we think our kids would like. And so often are like, oh, you're also a girl. Here's a story about a girl. Or this is a story about people who like horses. Here's a book about horses. But the idea of exposing a child to a bunch of things that they may or may not directly identify with actually in a way creates an ability for them to see past those superficial things and get a lesson out of any situation.
I mean, I even think about it with the Disney princesses. You know, my daughter's very drawn to Rapunzel. She likes that she has like long blonde hair, and my daughter has like kind of long curly-ish blonde hair. And I'm always like, what about Merida? She's strong, and like you should want to be like Merida, or like Tiana. You know, it's like you try to put the other ones in front of them, so it's not just about like the blonde, long-haired princess, you know?
But children gravitate to what looks like them. Does mine gravitate to, what's her name, Tiana?
Tiana.
Yeah, they love all the princes. They have all the costumes and dress like all of them, but they gravitate to the one, yes.
So I think it kind of shows a dual duty, right? As creators of media, right, we need to lift up more examples for children to be able to follow, because it's unpredictable what they identify with. Like, it would be really interesting to ask what Flynn loves about Rapunzel. Maybe it's the fact that I think she has a lot of pink dresses, right? Isn't she like one of the
purple?
Oh, sorry. Okay. Maybe those kinds of things where this is a great opportunity to talk about, like, what do you love about this character? What draws you to that? It might be something that we're thinking is what the child is attracted to. And I think having, you know, one, creating media and creating images that exist and lifting up voices is part of our duty. And the second is exposing our children to them. Just because you expose your child to it doesn't mean that their favorite book is going to be about a totally different character, but then they at least know it exists and it's a part of their universe.
I'd say the other challenge, you know, for me is I'm not as comfortable talking about race because I don't know, you know, what I might say that might actually not be the appropriate thing. And I think that's what bringing it to the forefront now and giving parents the right language will be helpful for, because if you're comfortable, your child will be comfortable. If you're uncomfortable, how do you teach your child to be comfortable? Like, I used to do consumer research for a living, and you know, we refer to Black people as African Americans. And I don't even know if today that's inappropriate. You know, I kind of need like to be schooled on that, but that was 100% 10 years ago, the right thing to say. And so it's almost like we need to have all the tools and the language to be comfortable, or how can we make our kids comfortable in talking about it if we can't even talk to them about it comfortably?
So Amanda, do you have any Black or African American friends that you're close to that you could sit down and say, can you help me with this?
Yeah, you know, I have actually someone who works for me that I, you know, reached out to, but that's also an uncomfortable situation as well. It's like an employee.
Okay.
But no, I mean, and that's a problem. Like, if I can't think of someone really quickly, that's a problem in my own life, right? And again, I'm not racist, but I have to widen my circle, you know, and I know, and I think that's like the big point of this movement right now is like, it's not enough just to not be racist. You actually need to try to understand it, right? And understand be like empathetic and understand their experience. I think that's really a lot of what it's about right now.
Yeah, and I think, Amanda, you bring up like there's a lot to unpack. I think you bring up a lot of points, but one of them is this idea that these are topics we're really uncomfortable with, and how do you make a child comfortable with something that you're uncomfortable with? And I think that one of the reasons why these conversations are difficult is because we're uncomfortable with them. It's not because they're complex. It's not because they're subtle. It's not because it's uncertain. It's because it activates something inside of us. Fear, guilt, shame, inadequacy, all of these things. And I think there's something to be said about remembering that we have really difficult conversations with our kids all the time about complicated things. They're just not difficult for us. Like, why you have to wear pants in public, why you can't eat the green part of the strawberry, right? There's so many complicated things. Why do I have to do homework that I don't want to do, right? Like, we already have a track record of talking about difficult things with our kids. What makes this special is that we're uncomfortable. It activates something inside of us. So maybe the really powerful thing that we can do for our kids is address that, validate that. This is really uncomfortable for me. I don't really know how to talk about this. I don't have all the
Maybe one
answers.
of the things we need to do is talk to more adults that need, you know, let's talk, have a conversation amongst ourselves to see if we can help you be more comfortable. Because I'm sure it's other things other than race. I'm sure it's probably some things that I'm uncomfortable talking about too that you might can help me with. But just find that partner or find somebody to talk about these things with so we can help the children.
Right.
Yeah.
We
And
need
that's
to
why we're having this conversation. I think that's why Your Mom Cares, which is predominantly an organization about children, is why we created this event, is to start having conversations like this, to be vulnerable together. Because it's very easy to be judgy, to tear people down, and that actually shuts conversation down. And sometimes people have to have a conversation before they can have the conversation perfectly or completely all-knowingly. Because some of these things that we may be trying to introduce our children to, we may not have access to in our community. It may not be reasonable for us to be able to discuss those things, right? So I think, like, for example, like there's a lot of things that happen all over the world, like I can't, there's no way I can access that. So I think part of it is, one, recognizing, helping children navigate feeling uncomfortable, because I think that's the number one thing about, you know, being creative, introducing diversity into your life, identifying with people that are very different from you, seeking different opinions, right? To have this kind of really intense, multimodal dialogue, and to recognize that I may not have an answer. That doesn't mean I have to be silent. And I may not have an answer. It doesn't mean we can't find one together. That was one of the first things Robin said. Hey, I don't know the answer to that. Let's look it up. Or, you know what? That's a great question. Let me think about it and I'll get back to this. That's something my mom said to me a lot, and I didn't really understand. And now I have a much better understanding, right? And it's something I have to do as a physician, right? Patients ask me things all the time that I don't know the answer to. And that's what I do. I admit that my knowledge isn't limitless, right? I think our children look up to us. And by admitting that we're not all knowing, makes them trust us more because it's genuine. If we pretend to have all the answers, kids don't question, and it makes it even harder for us to be like, hey, you know what, maybe this is, when they're older, bringing up topics that they don't really know, or they're like, oh, mom wouldn't know the answer to that, that we can still be a part of that conversation.
That's great.
So that, wow, this has been amazing. We have about 4 minutes left. So one thing I wanted to touch on is childhood looks really different right now, and kids are missing out on certain experiences. How, and this has already been a little bit of a theme in our conversation, how have you managed your grief about this, right? Your grief already of the fact that the loss of all of your favorite childhood memories that you know your kid isn't going to have, and how have you managed their frustration and grief?
Well, I mean, I'll say, I keep saying, like, I'm so happy my kids aren't of the age where they're graduating or missing their, like, you know, these things might sound silly, missing studying abroad or camp, which is like some people's like favorite experiences. Like, I'm grateful that my kids aren't that age. Obviously I'm in the, like, it's tough to all be like stuck in the house and like all the TV age. But honestly, one of the ways I've managed is to say, like, the isolation is kind of to choose socialization over isolation, not like completely bucking the, you know, the social distance rules, but saying, like, we're going to pick 3 families and these are going to be our people, and my kids won't be so isolated. So in some ways, to your point, I didn't, I'm like cushioning them from it a little bit. Because I didn't subject them as fully to it. You know, the first month I did, but then we started loosening, and it was like, you start weighing like the pros and cons. And And if you know you're, going to loosen in 2 weeks, it's like, screw it. And this is why like Governor Cuomo isn't even in New York announcing things in advance. Like he's literally like, tomorrow you could do this, because he knows when you know that you're about to be able to do something, you're like, screw it,
Yeah, so you're kind of describing that it's a really personal decision, and that you kind of, gave it's something for your family, and it's your family's unique decision, and you have to weigh the pros and cons of all of these factors in your life, right? Like the fact that you run businesses, right? That you're working from home, that there's a lot of practical aspects. And I think it's a really important thing for us as outsiders looking at other people's lives to keep in mind, right? That we may not know all of the reasoning that went behind it. And then two, kind of choosing a middle path, right?
Well, and we joke here that everybody like has their Corona exceptions. It's like, oh, we don't do that. Like, we don't go to the grocery store. You go to the grocery store, but their like caregiver is coming back and forth from New York City, and another family is like, I'm not going to New York City for like 3 months, and it's like everybody's got their thing, and you've got to pick what your things are.
Robin, what about you?
Well, with us being in North Carolina, we're just, centralized here. My mother-in-law had a stroke during the pandemic, so we just went back and forth helping take care of her. Sorry, my phone is off too. But going back and forth taking care of her. But my children and their wives, they have done an excellent job as far as entertaining the kids and making sure that they don't use the word bored, because it's enough to do around there. I cannot turn my phone off, guys. But
okay.
They I'm sorry, but they don't use the word.
Somebody really wants to get in touch with you.
No, they just getting those devices right now, and they're getting those devices right now. Okay, so they went on YouTube. They've done things, a lot of exciting things that they can do amongst themselves because they can't go to camp. They're doing some things online. They've been building things. They two of them are going to a summer school online, so they're enjoying that. So they're just trying to make it work during this different time.
Yeah. So finding alternative activities. And I think that sometimes it's easy for us to forget that there are so many other ways in which this time is really special for the kids, where they get so much one-on-one time, right? So much actual time where we're not distracted, where we're with each other, where we're doing other things. And these could be some of the best memories of their lives, even if it's different than the childhood we envisioned for them. And I think it's really important for us to remember that.
I totally agree with them with that, because we told our children these 3 or 4 months that you had time to spend with your children have been remarkable, because normally you would never get that. You won't get that back, and if this wouldn't have happened, you wouldn't have never been able to do it.
That's amazing. And I totally agree with that. So let's, I think we can take maybe 2 questions. Are there 2 questions that, Raghu, that you could share with us?
Sure. So Ilang, I don't know if you want to start with any of the ones that had come in earlier, but we do have another question here that is, well, here's some interesting ones. So how to get your teenager to be more open?
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by open? Ayana Fernandez, if you're there.
And we have another question that I'll send out as well to you. How soon is too soon, age-wise, to talk about Black Lives Matter?
Okay, so let's start with how to get your teenager to be more open. So my guess is what they're talking about is that teenagers have a very certain view of how the world works. That's why the person who knows the most in the world is a teenager. If you ever meet a teenager that doesn't know everything, something's wrong. So part of that's developmentally appropriate, but how do you kind of, I guess, shift their expectations, right? To like be accepting of the fact that the world is different now. Do you guys have any thoughts on this?
I think, first of all, don't wait until they become a teenager. Start talking to them earlier. And, you know, explain to them that it's okay to disagree. But I need to hear your point of view and you need to hear my point of view. But it's okay to disagree. You know, you can't go in there judging them. You can't go in and demanding my way or no way. You need to listen. We all need to listen and just be willing to agree not to, you don't have to agree with everything. You just have to listen. Agree to disagree. Mena, yes. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Will you just prompt me again? Sorry.
So I don't know if you have any experience with teenagers about how to get them to be more open in conversation.
I do not. Other than having been one, you know, like 20 something years ago, 25 years ago.
I do have another question that's interesting. So this came in. In addition to speaking with kids, I'm also curious about effective and respectful ways people can speak to other adults who start to act like some kids when they feel threatened, such as having difficulty understanding or knowing how to right wrongs.
It's a good question.
That's a great question.
I think one of the ways to talk to people, child, school age, teenager, adult, elder, is to remember that one of the main thing that people need to be able to hear is I hear you. Every person wants to be heard. So I think sitting down, hearing what they're saying. So sometimes people have words coming out of their mouths, but they mean something else, and trying to understand the meaning behind what they're saying. I'm afraid, I'm ashamed, I don't know what's going on. This is too much for me. I can't have this conversation right now. It's too painful. And I think also thinking about being patient, and sometimes people should need their defenses, right? I think we have a tendency to want to strip people's defenses away from them, but that's how their whole world functions. So I think kind of going off of what Robin was saying, sometimes we're going to agree to disagree. And if a conversation gets too hot, it's always good to take space. And usually, especially if this is someone that you have a long-term relationship with, it can be a series of conversations.
I also think that we have to respect the person talking, and the person talking has to respect what we have to say as well. So it's, you know, don't just come off heated. Let's respect each other's feelings and try to talk through this.
And another thing that I've found really helpful is to talk about respecting each person's dignity. Yes. Right. So I've had this situation a couple times when I talk to adults that are very emotional. And I think saying something about the fact that, you know, each person has their dignity, including me. And when you don't respect me, it's really important that as I am sitting here giving you a chance to talk, it is now my turn to talk and to say something.
Well, and I think what's happening of late, you know, to play off what I said before, is it's not just about respecting people's opinion. It's about respecting their experience and like trying to like actually understand their experience. And I think that is what has lacked, you know, in people who weren't racist this whole time, but they didn't go far enough to like put themselves in someone else's shoes. And that I think is what people are being called to do now, is to like really like understand someone else's experience, not just that they have a different point of view.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And I think I know we're almost out of time, but I do think it's important to address this question as to when is it ever too young to start talking about race? And I think that that's one of the areas where the answer is not everyone has that choice, right? Some people start having to have the conversation about race as soon as the child is verbal. I don't remember this, but when I came home from preschool one day, I was 3, I asked my dad what my skin color was. And he asked me, like, he did the thing you should do, which he said, "Oh, why do you ask that?" And I told him that when I was in school, all the kids were making fun of me because I wasn't Black and I wasn't white. So what are you? You're nothing. And my dad paused and was like, "Oh my gosh, how do I handle this?" And he said to me, I thought of something that was, so I kept asking him, I'm like, "What's my skin color? What skin color am I?" And he kept trying to distract me and he couldn't. So he kept thinking like, okay, what is something positive that I can say that she will associate with her skin? And he said to me, "You're honey colored." And I said, "Oh, honey. I love honey. Honey is sweet." And then he talked to me about how, you know, people have lots of different skin colors, but what matters is the color of their heart. And even hearts can have different colors, like red and green and purple. And I think that for some people, the truth is we start having to have these conversations very early. And if we're privileged enough to wait to have the conversation, that's a wonderful thing. But the truth is that these things are a part of the world, and it's worthwhile starting to have the conversation as young as possible, because that's just how that's when the minds are very open.
And
Well,
that's
interestingly,
right.
so before I was a mother, I took my nephew to a Duke basketball game up in, it was at Madison Square Garden, and Duke has a lot of white basketball players for like a basketball team. And I was trying to point out the best player on the team, and he was a Black player, and maybe there were 1 or 2 on the court at the time, but I was like, that one. And I didn't want to say the Black one. And my nephew goes, "Oh, the brown one." And I was like, so uncomfortable. I did not know how to address it, but he was being literal. Like, you know,
Yeah.
like he was being literal. And I literally, like, you know, went to my sister later because she wasn't sitting with us. And I'm like, I didn't handle this well, but we had like a situation. I don't know if you guys want to talk to Ellis about it. You know, like he called, you know, a Black man brown, and you need to deal with it, you know. And to this day, Robin, like, what should I have said? You know, to this day, I don't even know.
I mean, to me, it would have been fine for you to say the Black guy, but a lot of the children now, because they know their colors, they refer to me as being brown. You know, it's okay. But
And
I mean, I think you said you grew up saying African American, and trust me, Amanda, I'm gonna get back with you on that later to find out what people would rather be referred to, Black or African American. Okay.
I used to do research, and it was like Caucasian African American. It wasn't white and Black, but
Right.
now it's white and Black and brown. Honestly, brown is different, you know. So it's almost like we've simplified it, whereas like 10 years ago you had to get like fancy, you know.
yeah, and even talking about like the biological basis of skin color, right? It's melanin. There's a chemical compound in people's skin that provides color, and talking about how people have different amounts and it's supposed to help protect from the sun. That doesn't mean even if you're darker, you should still wear sunscreen, but that's why people who have lighter skins are more likely to have sunburns, and kind of talking about the physical realities. And then when they're older, starting to talk about how people have a need to categorize, right? And so one old-fashioned debunked way of doing it is by race, right? And I mean, these are ancient theories from that have been debunked for almost 100 years now, right? And so I think that there's a lot of ways to talk about this. Okay, guys, we got to wrap up. We're over time, but I really, really enjoyed this conversation with you. We spanned all kinds of topics, a lot of difficult things, a lot of good things. So I wanted to give a little bit of a summary of some takeaways of the things that I learned today from you guys. So one, I think Robin really pointed out that having conversations is really important. This isn't a one-time thing. This isn't the talk, it is a talk,
Yes.
And you have a million chances with your kids. And I think knowing that this is a conversation you'll have over and over and over again, I think helps release some of the pressure that it has to be perfect this time. Two, something that Amanda highlighted is the importance of us having taking a look at ourselves and our own lives and the example we're leading for our children. So always starting at home is one of the best places to start, because the truth is we do lead by example in so many ways. And so, you know, being okay looking at all the different places from our lives that this can be informed by, right? From work, from what we read, from our religions, all kinds of places. And also then translating this into the world we create for our child, right? Having stories, toys, movies, books, cultural events that aren't only their cultural events. And by living this example, we can show that there's something to get from all of these different resources. Three, I think sometimes we can choose when to have this conversation, and sometimes the conversation comes to us. Amanda, I think it's really amazing that you chose to have this difficult conversation with your kids. You didn't have to. And I think that's a really powerful thing to do, because sometimes one of the best things we can show our children is that we too are humans. We're not gods, we're not angels. And that can help them be more resilient, because they realize that sometimes it's okay to be perfectly imperfect. And having a conversation is better than not having one at all. So let's turn it over to Raghu and Meredith.
Wow, thank you so much. And I have a lot to say too, but that was a wonderful summary, Ilang, and thank you to Robin and Amanda. Obviously, we could be chatting for hours about this, and I think the best thing that I love about these events and these webinars is the fact that new friendships form and new collaborations form. And it seems like Robin and Amanda, you guys are going to have your own little Zoom soon together, which is wonderful.
I would like that.
Yes.
And I think one thing I just wanted to say is that the first is, you know, growing up, my mother would always say, I'm learning and growing with you boys. And I think that really stuck with me, as categorizing her as human. And it allowed me for myself to continuously be curious and open to new ideas and experiences and opinions. So that, for me personally, that helped a lot in my growth. And I think the second is, I just want to emphasize to folks that kids are a lot smarter than we tend to give them credit for.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I had an experience recently with a child who was 9, and I forgot how old she was as I was having the conversation, because she said, you know, this happened and this argument happened, and the person just stormed out of the room. And she said, wouldn't it have been better if he just said, hey, I need some space, give me a few minutes, and walked out? And I was like, wait, what? Yeah, you're completely right. So sometimes we get wrapped up in our own emotions. And so I think that's why I wanted to start with a meditation, because for me, before I go into any type of difficult conversation, particularly with kids, it's trying to ground myself and being aware of my own personal emotions and opinions before I go in. And so I just wanted to state that, because it helps me, and I hope it might resonate with some others. And so thank you so much for being with us, for everyone participating. I apologize for the live stream not going up, but we will have a recording up on our website. I'm sure Your Mom Cares will spread it around, and I'm sure that there's many more to come. So thank you again to Patsy, Meredith, Amanda, Robin, and Sharon as well, for starting this collaboration with us. Meredith.
Oh, just thank you, Ilang, especially for facilitating this conversation, Raghu for being one of the folks who made it happen. And thank you so much to Amanda and Robin for giving of your time, not just to our organizations, but to everyone who was listening, and for willing to be vulnerable in this space and share things that are part of your family with a broader audience, because I think that there's a lot to be gained by creating these shared spaces to have conversations. So thank you on behalf of Your Mom Cares, all of you, for participating tonight.
Thank you for having us.
I think Ilang and Meredith, did you want to make an announcement?
Oh yeah.
Go for it.
We're gonna have a follow-up conversation, Meredith and I, on Instagram Live at 3:30 p.m. Pacific time, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, and we're just gonna like talk a little bit more about some questions that came up and do a little follow-up, just to keep the conversation rolling. So it'll be streaming on I think the Minds social media and the Your Mom Cares social media. So keep an eye out for that.
When is it again?
So next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday?
Yes.
What time for me?
4th.
4 Eastern, okay.
Oh, sorry. It's on the 24th of June at 5:30 Eastern time, 3:30 Pacific time.
All right.
And the Instagram handles are at Minds Foundation and at Your Mom Cares. And we hope this is just the beginning of so much more. So thanks everyone for joining.